I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
People do not understand what money is, I find.
Yes.
Like if they make $10 today, they think they're going to automatically make $10 tomorrow. And if they lose $10 today, they think they're going to lose $10 tomorrow. Like people just don't know what money is and the basics of money, because we're geared towards just thinking of money as a salary, and we just need to get bigger and bigger salaries, and that's success. But money is much more nuanced than that.
Right. And as a therapist, I mean, we know money is like the number one stress of most people in America. And I would see it all the time. And there's all these studies about debt and mental health. The more debt you have, the worse your mental health tends to be. And we don't know which comes first. Your mental health problems lead to more debt, or your debt leads to more mental health problems. But we know they play off of each other.
And it's probably hand in hand.
I think it is. I think there's such a link between mental health and financial health. And I wish that we talked more about that.
So how does, in your view, how does someone take control of their money? So once again, Amy, I think this is like your fourth time on the podcast?
I think so.
You're gonna quickly break the record of most times on the podcast. So I've Amy Morin, author of 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, and also 13 Things Mentally Strong Parents Don't Do, and the upcoming author of 13 Things Mentally Strong Women Don't Do, which I just got my copy of. I'm excited to read, and then you'll be on a podcast later to talk about that. But the reason I love having Amy on is I basically want to make my life better. And every time Amy's on, I feel there's takeaways for me that make my life better. And so we came up with a list of things to talk about. And I know there's going to be things here that I'm gonna use in my life starting today.
Well, good. I hope so.
I hope so as well. I'll let you know for sure. But it's just like, about like a month ago, I had on Yuval Harari, author of *Sapiens* and a bunch of other great, amazing books. And I took away a lot of knowledge from his books, but he also explained to me why he doesn't carry around a smartphone, and I haven't carried around a smartphone ever since. So I always try to take away something that makes my life better. So today, we have a bunch of things I want to talk about, but I also want to talk about first, we're going to talk about 10 mental strength exercises that will make you stronger as opposed to the things to avoid. But I also want to talk about your recent article, 5 Ways to Simplify Your Life So You Can Make Room for Things That Matter Most. And I feel this intersects a lot with my own story from the past few years. So well, and actually, before even that, I want to ask you what Steve just asked you before the podcast started. How did you just sit down and come up with the 13 things that mentally strong people don't do? I mean, you had gone through all these horrific things in your life, and you had to kind of yourself find inner strength to push through them. And we went over that in our very first podcast together. But what did you do? Did you just sit down and write them, or?
Yeah. So as a therapist, I'd really studied people over the years to know what were the good habits that help people, but also which were the bad habits that kept people stuck. And I think I'd just never seen them all written down in the same place before. And so as I was in the midst of feeling sorry for myself, I said, well, mentally strong people don't do that. And so then
How do you know that mentally strong people don't do that?
when I'd see people in my therapy office who would get better faster, or people who had been through hell and back, and the people that bounced back, that was one of the things they didn't do. Even if something horrible happened that week, they would say, okay, this happened. And they might be sad, they might be really angry, they might be upset, but they didn't say, poor me, this is terrible, I'll never get through this, my life is awful, my life is worse than everybody else's, all of those sorts of things about throwing a pity party. And so I realized, but then I would see the other people that were in the midst of that, and they really didn't want to get better. Some of them, they just really wanted to justify why they couldn't change their life and say, this is why nothing will work for me. So it was one of the things I noticed right off is, okay, that doesn't help people. But at the same time, after going through several losses in my life, here I was thinking, this isn't fair. I shouldn't have to deal with this. I shouldn't have to lose somebody else. I thought, all right, well, if I've learned anything, it's that would keep me stuck. So I sat down and I wrote the list of all those things that would keep me stuck. And it was just a letter to myself. And as you know, I posted it online hoping it would help somebody else. I didn't imagine it would go viral or that I'd write books about it. But sometimes people will say, was there magic in the number 13? Did you mean to come up with 13 things? And no, I didn't. When I was done, I just had 13.
And do you find, so it's one thing, being aware of them, like you were aware that you were feeling sorry for yourself, and you were probably also aware that while you were feeling sorry for yourself, your life wasn't able to progress. Like when I think back to the periods in my life where I felt the most sorry for myself, sometimes it would literally take years out of my life because, like you say, it would almost be like a way to justify not improving, or it really takes away from the mental energy and the mental real estate it requires to move forward. It's almost like the area of your brain where you feel sorry for yourself is the same area of your brain you would have used to improve and get out of the situation.
Exactly. I think it does. I think it takes a lot of energy to say, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and sulk, or I'm not going to change my life. And you must then have to come up with excuses about why, because people will try to help you, or you might come up with an idea, but you just say, oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I find that I still occasionally feel sorry for myself, but the quicker I can recognize that I'm doing that and that it's not healthy for me and that I need to replace it with something that can improve me, the quicker I get over whatever it is that I was feeling sorry about. So that's drastically reduced the time that I'm wasting.
Exactly. When you put it into perspective and you think, all right, I'm like, this feeling sorry for yourself for 2 minutes ruin your life? Probably not. But it's when you feel sorry for yourself and you stay stuck there for hours or days or weeks or months that it becomes a problem.
Yeah. And, I would imagine for you, when you were feeling sorry for yourself, I mean, what were you doing those moments you were feeling sorry for yourself? Were you able to work? Were you able to kind of achieve any kind of maximum potential?
I worked mostly because I had to, but other than that, I just wanted to just sit there and stare at the wall and think this isn't fair, or, why me? Or just complain and vent and, not do anything.
But a lot of these things are addictive, like, and I know we're focusing on this, so feeling sorry for yourself is the first thing you wrote on your list of 13 things mentally strong people don't do. But a lot of these things are addictive in the brain. Like, I imagine feeling sorry for yourself is some way to, so whenever you're stressed, cortisol spikes in the body and the body wants to get rid of it. So there's 2 ways to get rid of the cortisol. One way is to feel sorry for yourself and throw a pity party, because then it's almost as if, you don't have to deal with the stress. You could just feel sorry for yourself. And the other way is improving or figuring out your way out of the bad situation. So we could become addicted to these negative patterns just by saying, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. What's an action step someone can take to avoid, to get out of that state?
I think well, as you say, it's an action step. You have to do something because we get stuck in a cycle where you think my life is terrible, you feel bad, and then you do nothing, and it reinforces the thoughts of my life is horrible. So to break that cycle, you got to say, I got to do something different. Even though I don't feel like getting out of the house, I'm going to do it anyway. Or even though I don't feel like helping somebody today, I'm going to do it. And you just have to take that leap of faith that it might make you feel better and take action even when you don't feel like it.
I think this is an important point because I think actions precede emotions, precede thoughts. And so sometimes people think a thought and they feel like, oh, this is my thought and now I'm either going to feel happy or sad and then I'm going to take action. But the reality is you take an action, that leads to an emotion, and then your thoughts are sort of rationalizations of why you're feeling that emotion. Like it goes, this is like science, like it goes completely in the other direction. So your advice of doing something that's positive is actually the most important step towards changing the emotions and then changing the thoughts.
Right, because I think for most of us, it's a habit to think, I'm going to wait until I feel better to do better. But you got to do it the other way around. You just got to say, I'm going to take the action even though I don't feel like it. And then that can change how you feel and how you think.
So okay, let's talk about, before we get into the mental exercises, first, how's things going in your life?
Wonderful. I can't complain. My next book will come out in a few months and it's done, it's written, it's been edited. And so the hard part is over.
I feel like you live the ideal life. Like we were just talking before the podcast, when in the summer, you live on a boat in Maine. In the winter, you live on a boat in the Keys in Florida.
I have a house in Maine that I live on in the summer.
Oh, sorry,
But
a house
boat,
in Maine.
yes.
Yeah, a boat in Maine might be hard anyway.
Right.
So, but you kind of have crafted, or you've sort of done life design, where you've basically said, where are you unhappy, and let's make my life accommodate so I could be happier.
Yeah, it was a decision a few years ago. It was my husband and I were in Maine. It was snowy. It was cold. It was February. We're like, what are we doing? We don't have to be here anymore. We both work remotely. So, and he'd always dreamed of living on a sailboat ever since he was a little kid. And so we said, let's do it. It was tempting, like we'll do it someday or you wait or when we're retired. But, in the back of my mind, I've lost a lot of people in my life at a young age. It's not guaranteed. So he said, let's just do this. And I knew nothing about boats. I said, you just pick out the boat and I'll just show up with my stuff. And that's basically what we did. I knew he'd pick out something nice, and he did, and packed up everything I could fit in a suitcase, and off we went.
And so you didn't feel this instinct like, no, I'm never going to live in a boat. I want to have like the nice house with the picket fence and the kids running around. Like you didn't feel uncomfortable being so mobile or up in the air?
Not at all. Like, I think, okay, we could have bought a more expensive house. We could have done more different things, but I just see so many people that work at a job so that they can afford the expensive car that they drive and to afford their mortgage payment. You think, well, what's the point of working so hard and so long just to have more expensive stuff? And so I knew I didn't want to get caught in that trap. And I just wanted to live and go on an adventure while I could, and just seemed like a good idea.
And so this segues into your article, which got a lot of traction, 5 ways to simplify your life so you can make room for things that matter most. And your first thing, I think, is declutter your house. But I imagine living on a boat, you were forced to declutter. You can't carry,
Right.
all sorts of dining room tables on a boat and 60,000 towels and chairs and all this other stuff.
It was a wonderful lesson in how little that I needed to be happy. And so I literally just packed some clothes in my laptop, and that was basically it. But I don't need much. And I thought of you actually when I wrote the article, because obviously you were known for only having, 9 possessions?
Yeah, I basically, for several years, just had kind of a backpack, and I would have 2 outfits, and essentially then just my computer and phone, and that's it, and a Kindle. Well, on my phone I would read books, so I didn't need the Kindle actually after a while, and that was basically it. A toothbrush, that's it.
And did you feel like it was simple then in some ways because you didn't have to worry about extra stuff?
Yeah, and what was really great, I noticed the most when my mental inclinations change. So it used to be if I passed a bookstore or a store where I saw something, oh, hey, I like that, I could buy it, I would buy it. But now, since everything had to fit in my backpack, I would think to myself, oh, I should buy this book. But then I would say, no, I can't fit it in my backpack. Or if I saw a shirt I liked, oh, I should buy it. No, I'd have to take something out of my backpack and throw it away in order to buy that shirt. I stopped feeling this urge to buy new things.
Right.
And it's easy to stay decluttered if you're not buying new things.
Right. And, that's how it is living on a boat, too, is obviously there's only so much room. And so when it came to like buying a lamp, it was a big deal to buy a lamp because instead of having, 14 lamps in a house, I knew I was just going to have one lamp. So I got to pick out whichever one I wanted, and that was it. And I don't have to now worry about shopping for more lamps or anything like that. Once you have everything you need, I don't know, it takes a lot of the stress out of having to buy more or worry about if you have enough. Nope, the closets only fit so much. And
yeah, and for me, I wasn't living in a boat, but I was living in different Airbnbs, and so part of the thing for me was I couldn't buy things that would be a hassle to move. So, for instance, even a lamp or a TV or whatever, I couldn't buy one of those because what am I going to do? Carry my backpack and a lamp and a big TV? So I had to, find Airbnbs that I liked living in, but I was always moving around in different cities and even in this city to different Airbnbs, so I didn't know what they had. And then when I finally did, so now I've settled down into an apartment, but it's kept me really minimal. Like I still have that feeling of, okay, I can't buy anything that's a waste or not immediately and all the time usable. Like I find that every square foot has to be usable or it's a waste, and everything I get has to be very usable. Like I'm going to use it even on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really kept me at a minimum to how I decorate or what things I buy and so on.
That's what I think, simplifying your life. Obviously, most people aren't going to move onto a boat and they aren't going to carry around a backpack without any other possessions. But, you look at the research and our house sizes have tripled. And, when you look at the charts of depression, anxiety, all of that's gone up over the years. The bigger houses and the more stuff we have isn't making us happier. And even when you look at how much people spend on storage bins and storage containers and then they have to rent storage units. I mean, it's a $1 billion industry because we have so much stuff, and yet we keep doing it.
And that was what set off my simplification. I actually like that word simplification better than minimalism. I feel minimalism has turned into a quasi-religious word.
Right.
And I don't really consider myself a minimalist, but maybe it's the same thing as simplification. But anyway, at the time I did it, I had 2 apartments where the lease was coming up, and I was in a kind of crisis state, and I just didn't want to deal with it, and I didn't want to deal with moving everything to storage. Like, why do I need everything in storage? Because I'm never going to look at it anyway when it's in storage. And yes, I'm going to miss some things, but I decided I just don't want to deal with keeping track mentally of where everything is, paying the storage, eventually getting it out of storage. So that's when I just got rid of everything. And yes, people ask me, oh, it must have been so freeing. You must have not missed anything. And I really do miss things, and I'm nostalgic for some things that I gave away, but or threw out or gave to charity or whatever. But missing things and being a little sad is part of life too.
Right. And for me, I had collected a lot of stuff. So when my mom passed away, I got a lot of her stuff. When my husband passed away, I had all of his stuff. And it's all in boxes. And, in my basement in the house in Maine. And at some point, and I would always feel bad that I wasn't doing anything with this stuff, but it wasn't stuff I needed. And so I'd think, well, someday I'll do something with it or find somebody to give it to. And I didn't really realize, I think, how much just having those boxes stacked up down there really weighed me down, even though I don't really hang out in the basement and don't stare at those boxes. But just getting away from it all and going to be on a boat and not having to think about that it was like a huge weight lifted off of me and just really motivated me to say, okay, get rid of stuff I don't need.
Right. And so now when you eventually move into a house, let's say if you have kids or you and your husband decide to settle down someplace in the middle between Maine and Florida, like South Carolina
right.
or whatever, you'll probably bring this inclination to simplify with you so that you don't go off and, everybody has all these things around this house that's just for appearance. They don't use them. Like you probably be very functional in what you buy and purchase.
Right. I don't need extra stuff. And it was so freeing. And I just felt really happy, I guess, being on a boat with knowing, okay, a suitcase full of clothes and a laptop, and that's all I need.
And did you find it removed you out of the status game? Like there's no keeping ahead of the Joneses if there's no Joneses.
Right, right. And I think, that's a big thing. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about the Florida Keys is it's not much different than Miami, whereas in Miami, you're driving by Lamborghinis and people their status is really important. In the Florida Keys, nobody cares. Everybody's wearing, their flip-flops and listening to Jimmy Buffett, and you have no idea if they're homeless or they're a millionaire. And, I just find that to be quite freeing because, not impressed necessarily by expensive things, but I don't have to worry about that when I'm down there.
This is kind of the problem with New York City is that no matter how much X you have, whether X is money or status or power or fame or whatever, there's always your next door neighbor who has more.
Right.
And so it's hard. Envy is not that I would say in general I'm an envious person, but you're just walking around New York City, everybody's got something you want and a little more of it. And it's definitely an emotion that you constantly have to fight here.
Absolutely. Obviously, I'm not from New York, but whenever I come to New York, I definitely feel that. It's just looking around at people too and seeing, the expensive items that people have, and it's a different world for sure.
I always wonder, like, if I'm in a store and I see all these people in the store, like, where did they come from? Like, why are they buying these things? How do they make their money? Like, it seems like everybody, I wish I could do a freeze frame of everybody in the store and then make it like a web page and click on them just to read their entire stories. But of course, that can't happen.
That would be fascinating, though, wouldn't it?
That'd be a good kind of website. So the second thing you have is, and this is related to your book, which is get rid of bad mental habits. For instance, feeling sorry for yourself, dwelling on the past, giving away your power. We've talked about feeling sorry for yourself, and that's related to dwelling on the past. What's giving away your power?
So thinking, okay, somebody makes me mad or somebody makes me do something, makes me feel bad about myself. It gives other people power over you, or even events in your life saying, I can't have a good life because I had a bad childhood, or I can't enjoy life because I have a bad job. And really saying, that you're powerless over how you spend your time, how much happiness you have, who you spend it with.
It's really interesting because there's two parts to each statement you just said. Like, I can't do X because of Y. And like, I can't enjoy life because I haven't gotten this promotion yet at work. And the second part is really the more important. Like, why do we need that second part to enjoy life, for instance? All of the first part's the same thing. I can't enjoy life more. But after the because, there's always something different, because I haven't got a promotion, or because I haven't gotten married, or because I haven't had children yet. And so it's sort of like we give power to all these things after the because. How do we avoid that? Like, if all your life you wanted to, I don't know, be a professional baseball player, and you just got rejected by, being a baseball player, how do you get over that disappointment?
So I think it comes down to accepting, okay, this is the way it is, and then knowing that life is happening right now. And yes, you can spend the rest of your life disappointed, but that's a choice. You could also say, okay, I'm going to choose to be happy right now. And knowing that happiness is a choice, and it's all about saying, how do I want to live my life given the hand I was dealt? So, and it easily could be lead to feeling sorry for yourself, like, oh, the New York Mets just rejected me. That was my last chance to be a professional baseball player. It's what I've wanted since I was 5 years old. And before you talked about, okay, now you have to do things to get over that feeling. What would you recommend someone in that position do? So then you say, well, what else can I do with my life? Maybe you take your baseball skills and you say, I'm going to coach sports, or I'm going to but maybe you say, I'm going to get into something completely different. I'm going to get into finance. But what am I going to do next? So focus on the action of what are you going to do about it?
How do you, if your passion has been like one thing for so many years, and a lot of people ask, how do I find my passion or my purpose in life, or my purpose in life's a bad word because there could be many purposes, but how do I find things that I'm passionate about when I've been passionate about one thing for so long? And I find for myself, it's almost hard to answer that question because I expose myself to so many different things, like whether it's reading a lot of books or watching a lot of videos or having podcast guests. I'm always interested in different things, almost too many things. But let's say someone who's been single-minded in their passions, or let's say they've been at a paralegal job for 20 years and they've never sought out their passions. What's the first step, do you think, for these people to find what their next passion is or their first passion is?
I think set a goal. I'm going to try something new every day, or
Yeah.
once a week, I'm going to go out and do something, learn about something else that's completely different than what I've been doing, and just explore and see what's out there.
I think that's really important because, like last week, Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, we interviewed him, and I was reading a bunch of his books to prepare. And for instance, he has a book, Astrophysics in a Hurry, and I thought to myself, man, I love this. Like, I've never, since I was 6 years old, I haven't been interested in space or astrophysics or anything like that before, and I certainly don't like the math of it. But suddenly I felt like I wanted to get a PhD in astrophysics without the math.
Right.
I asked him if I could do that, if that's possible. He said, no, you definitely need the math, so that's out. But it's like you have to definitely expose yourself to things that you didn't know whether or not in advance, whether you would be interested in it.
Right. I think it comes as a surprise to a lot of people when they figure out, oh, I'm actually kind of interested in this. Or maybe it uses some of the same skills that you use for something else and you apply it to something completely different, but you find that that's helpful. So I think it's all about putting yourself out there. We get stuck in a rut really easy. And when you just keep heading down the same path, you hang out with the same people, you do the same things every day, it's easy to think, I don't really have any interests. But when you branch out and you start doing new things, you'll uncover things that you just never imagined you might be passionate about.
Yeah, come to think of it, everything that I've ever been passionate about has just been by accident. So I might read a novel where the main character is getting pleasure from doing something, and I think, oh, I'd really like to try what that person's doing. Or I might watch a show, or I might see a video, or talk to somebody. Like, what's the last thing you got passionate about that was just sort of an accidental discovery?
Probably snorkeling down in the Florida Keys, thinking, wow, this is amazing. It wasn't something I thought I would love as much as I do, but I love it.
Why'd you try it?
It was there. It was one of those things. It was an opportunity. I can go, and there's a coral reef around the corner from where I am a lot of times. So it was a matter of, hey, let's go try that. And it's something I love to do.
And so now whenever you get a chance, do you snorkel?
Yes, I do.
Is there a metric by which you judge improvement? Like, do you go deeper and deeper, or do you take photographs and you see light? I'm trying to figure out where the dopamine hit comes. Like, do you put snorkeling photographs on your Instagram and you judge your improvement by how many likes they get, or maybe there is no status thing at all?
Yeah, I don't even know that there is a status thing. I think it's one of the things in life that I just find pure joy in. I could lose myself in. I love to jet ski too. And so just being on the ocean, being on the water, somebody from Maine, I'm just impressed by, clear water that you can look at fish, because you can't do that very well in Maine. So it's novel still. It's something interesting to do. And I just lose time and like to learn about different things that I'm seeing.
We'll learn about, meaning like if you see some fish, will you then research them later?
Yeah, or take somebody with me who can tell me, hey, that's a parrotfish. Oh, what's that? So I find that to be fascinating.
Okay, so I'm going to go to number 3 of your 5 ways to simplify people. This one I've talked about and written about so many times, but I would say this is the most important thing. Cut out toxic people.
Yes.
This is so important. It is life-saving.
When you look at sometimes how much energy people take up in your life, and sometimes maybe it's somebody you only see once a week for 20 minutes, but then you dread seeing them for 4 days, and then after you've seen them, the next 4 days, you can't stop thinking about it. And you look at, well, how much time of your life did that person just eat up? And so I think it's really important to just look at who in your life takes up mental energy. Maybe they don't even take up your physical time, but they take up your mental energy. And if it's not working, it's okay to cut people out. And certainly in some circumstances, maybe you can't cut out your mother-in-law, or
why can't you?
Well, if it would cause marriage trouble, then maybe you think, all right, I can't cut her out completely, but maybe you decide I'm going to set boundaries, or we're going to have rules, or I'm going to say in my house, these are the rules. If she's going to come into our house, this is what I think we should have for rules. She can't nag at us, or she can't criticize me, or something like that. And then sometimes it's emotional boundaries of saying, okay, this is how she is. It's just going to roll off my back. But sometimes it's about also saying, I'm just going to limit my contact or cut somebody out altogether.
So it seems like just from what you said, there's three categories of toxic people. There's the people who you see, oh, this person's toxic. I'm definitely going to avoid them. Like maybe every time you see them, they yell at you or they put you down in some way, and you realize, oh, I don't feel good every single time I see them. I'm just going to stop saying yes to seeing them. And you're allowed to do that for whatever reason.
Yep.
Like they're a friend. You don't have to be friends with them anymore or whatever. Then there's toxic people who you have to see, like a boss or a mother-in-law. And so a lot of times when I write about this, people say, but what about if the toxic person's my boss? And in what you just, I'm not saying your mother-in-law is toxic. I'm just, or even your mother.
Right.
Forget about mother-in-law. It could be your own mother. What do you do about the toxic people that you have to see, even on a daily basis, like a boss?
So one thing to do is if you know somebody is critical or they do something, they're overly negative, just come to terms with that. Don't try to change the person, because I think sometimes we walk into the situation wishing that people would be different or hoping that they'd do something different. So just knowing, okay, this is how this person is. And then to know, well, how does it normally affect me? Maybe you feel bad about yourself. Maybe your anger goes through the roof. Maybe you get really upset about things. So just recognizing, okay, I can't control what the person does, but how am I going to control how I respond? And then what am I going to do before I talk to the person or after I talk to the person? Maybe you decide, all right, every time I have to interact with my mother, I'm going to treat myself to something great. But something to say, how am I going to control how I respond to this person? If it's not really an option to cut the person out, then it's up to me to decide how I'm going to respond and to take steps to do that.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
I think also like let's say I used to have bosses that were toxic. I think I used to pander to them initially.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'll be extra nice to them so maybe they like me, or I'll try to have a talk with them about what's going wrong so maybe they'll change. But people don't really change that much, and the pandering would just make me feel bad afterwards.
Right.
Because like, oh, I wasn't. Not only were they still toxic to me, but I wasn't even myself. So I feel bad not being authentic. I think in those cases, it's you have to sort of create some scarcity of yourself. Like if you used to spend a lot of time trying to pander to them or please them, if I remove myself from the situation to the minimum contact, like, oh, if I see the boss in the hall, I'll nod hi, but I'll just focus on my work and not try to pander. If you create scarcity of yourself, your value goes up.
Right.
You know, it's almost like a rule of economics that if you reduce supply, the value of you goes up, even in your boss's eyes. It's like a psychological thing.
Yes, I think so too. And I used to work with this therapist that I know who would just come to the conclusion of helping her clients, let's accept it. So when she had a client who had to go to or who was going to go to some sort of family gathering around the holidays, and, you know, there was like the drunk uncle that made inappropriate comments, or the extra critical great aunt who would always say something about her size or something like that. So they made like a family bingo scorecard of like, okay, when all of this stuff happens, then you'll have bingo, just as a fun way to say it's going to happen. It has nothing to do with you, just to go in and have fun with it. But to know that, you don't have to try to change these people. You don't have to pander to them. Just know that this is what your family is like. And if you choose to go to a holiday function, it's going to happen.
And I'll add, it's important not to gossip about them behind their back.
Right.
Because that's still taking up their mental real estate. And in fact, very negative mental real estate, because then the people you're gossiping with will think you're a gossip, which could create a bad reputation. Or what you say could get back to the person. That happens 99 times out of 100 anyway. So it's important not to do that. It's important not to say kind of snide things to them while you're interacting with them. Like, it's, again, just kind of understanding your reaction, maybe reducing supply, and so on. So the third type of toxic person, I think, is where you don't know if they're toxic or not. And I think this could come in many sly forms. It could be the friend who's a little jealous of you, so it's just subtly putting you down, but maybe you feel a sense of loyalty because of your best friends 5 years ago and they really helped you through some difficult situation, so you feel loyal to them. Or I don't know, like, how do you recognize someone who's kind of on the fence but still toxic? I think this is the most insidious toxic person.
I think so too. And I think a lot of people, when they're networking, you meet somebody and they seem great at first, and then you have that feeling of, oh, maybe not, or something feels a little icky, or they're just using me. And I think to just pay attention when you have those thoughts and to those feelings, it's to know, okay. And then how do you set some boundaries maybe so that if this person is starting to do something, how do you set boundaries to push back instead of saying, yeah, welcome into my life and I'll do that. If somebody's bossing you around or asking too much from you, start saying no and then see what happens.
But sometimes it's hard to tell. Like, I had a friend who he was always super nice to me. We got close. He would visit me. He would even drive like 100 miles to hang out and visit me at my home, and we became really good friends. But I realized that lots of negative things were happening in his life. Like, he was, I gradually started to realize he was a drug addict and other types of addict. And then we started doing some business together, but it never worked out. And then he would, ask for favors. And because we were friends, I'd always want to help him out, like, introduce him to people who could help him, or, lend him money in the worst case. And then just gradually, it took a long time for me to realize, you know what? Even though he's just the nicest guy in the world, this is toxic to me. And that was hard to realize. And I feel really bad because he doesn't know why I broke off contact as much as I did. And so he gets disappointed, and then I feel bad. And, it's a little insidious.
It is, and especially when somebody's nice, because we don't want to put kind of people in categories, a good person or a bad person. We put them in the good category because they're a nice human being. Then it's harder for us to wrap our brain around the fact that, okay, that may be true. This is a nice person, but on the other hand, it's not good for me for X, Y, and Z. That takes a while to get to that point before we recognize it. But I think once you do start recognizing that, you get better at recognizing it in the future.
Yeah, maybe you get better at recognizing in the future. I think that's what's happened to me. And I will say that definitely the difference between the times I was failing the most and the times I was succeeding the most is the exact people I have around me. And, people always say, oh, you should have impact on life. You should, and there's all this stuff going on in politics, and there's lots of ways you could state your opinion, but really impact is making sure you have good people around you and supporting them in ways that you can that are healthy so they become even better, and then they help you become better. I think this is so key to success.
I think so too. And when I talk about mental strength, I think sometimes people think it's just an individual journey. It's all about being mentally strong and you're the lone wolf. But I think the people you surround yourself with, this team of people, really makes a huge difference, because there's rough times in your life. You need people to help you through them. And even when you're on the top, things are going really well. Sometimes you need people to give you a reality check, or you need people who can be honest with you and point out the potential flaws of what you're doing too.
That's such a good point. Like, I could think of both when things were the worst for me and things were the best for me. I really had nobody to talk to in both times to set me straight.
Yeah.
So when things were the worst for me, initially I was so ashamed of it that I wouldn't talk to anybody. So I didn't let good people help me. And then when things were the best for me, I was usually so arrogant about it. I had nobody to say, hey, ease up on what you're doing. Like, it's not, you need to kind of protect yourself in various ways. Now I know better, but this was for years and years. I didn't really understand this.
Right. And I think a lot of people, we live in a fairly lonely world, right? That a lot of people don't have.
Even though we're tribal animals.
Right.
Like, connection's important.
And face-to-face contact, and to actually have true friends. The number of friends people have, it decreases over the years. By the time people get to be 60 years old, most people say they have zero confidants.
How many close friends do you think someone should have?
I think 4 or 5 is probably.
And how do you define close friend?
I think somebody that you could call either with good news or with bad news, somebody that would sit with you through the worst, but they'd also sit there with you through the best.
It's interesting. Like, so maybe this is a fourth toxic person, or maybe I'm toxic. But like, I'm gonna have you put your every now and then I'm gonna ask you to put your therapist hat on.
Okay.
So I have a friend or a couple friends that I was really close to, but it seemed like I got really close to them when they were going through hard times and I helped them. And then when I was going through hard times, they like obsessively helped me. Like they would call every day and like they were always helping me. But then I don't know, somehow the relationship dwindled and I don't really understand why. Like I really like this, it's a couple and I really like them, but somehow I don't really even understand. They basically cut off contact with me and I can't even think of what I did. I only did good things, I think. I mean, maybe I did something toxic, but I doubt it. And I don't really understand. And so that's their decision. And I sometimes feel myself feeling anger about it, but I shouldn't. Like it's their decision to not be my friend. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but that's basically the situation. I find myself resentful.
Did you have things that you did with them outside of them, like of helping each other? Did you have things in common?
Yeah, and we would get together for dinner or coffee occasionally, and somehow it all just stopped. And I would say, and I would run into them at parties, and they're like, "Oh," they'd be all friendly. "Oh, we have to get together. Well, let's get together. I miss you." But then I would reach out, and I would never hear from them.
And so then, I guess, what do you make of that? What sense do you make?
I don't know.
Happening?
I don't know. I think either I feel like they used me somehow, or maybe I upset them and they must have misinterpreted something I did. I really have no idea. It seems like they're really angry at me and I have no clue. Usually I have a clue why someone might be angry at me. Like I might stop talking to them, or I might have not responded to an email, or I might have specifically done something that they don't like. But here I can't figure it out at all.
I think when any relationship ends, there's like a sense of grief and loss and going through that. And it's so much easier when we know why, because you can be mad at somebody, or you can think I made a mistake or that person messed up. But then when it just like dwindles, disappears, and then ends in a strange way, it's harder to make sense of it, right? To wrap your head around it and think, this is why it is. So how do you deal with it? Do you still run into these people?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Yeah, I just because we're in the same social circles. I occasionally run into them at parties, or they live around the corner from me, so might run into them on the street.
Would you ever ask them?
Do you think I should, or do you think that's because it's not like I could change them, or it feels weird somehow saying, "Hey, why did you just?" Do you think I should ask them, or do you think I should just ignore it?
Would they tell you? Are they the kind of people that would tell you the truth and be honest if they were offended by something, or if they?
I don't know, actually. Because I never encountered this before.
Right. Because I think for most people, I mean, it would just be easy to say, "Oh, we just lost touch," or "We're busy," and obviously that part then isn't helpful. But if somebody were honest and said, actually, you did this one thing, or we felt like when this happened to you, you changed, or whatever it was, could be helpful to know. But in the end, I don't know that you'd get a truthful answer from them anyway.
Yeah. So I think I just have to. I like you were saying before, it's my choice how I react to this and just make different friends.
Right. And, there's 101 reasons why. And I think sometimes we come up with one conclusion and it's either, I messed up or something like that. But that's only one potential reason. So then to be comfortable with the uncertainty of, okay, 101 reasons why this could have happened. You might never know the answer. And,
people always use the word closure.
Yeah.
Like there's such a temptation to write to them, for instance, say, "Hey, can we get together and discuss?" Or, "Hey, for whatever it is I did, I don't really know, but I'm sorry." There's this temptation to somehow kind of go understand the full circle of what happened. But at the same time, I don't know if that would really benefit me in any way, like, or make me feel healthier about it.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's just about being sort of comfortable with the uncertainty and knowing, okay, it is what it is for whatever reason, and to try to just sit with that discomfort and move forward.
Yeah, feeling uncomfortable with feeling comfortable with the uncertainty. I think that's a real key piece of advice, not just in this situation, but in many types of situations. Like, why did someone reject me for a job or reject me for an opportunity? You're never really going to know the truth
Right.
in 99 out of 100 cases.
Right. I think in some ways it would be really helpful if we had that information. If somebody said, gosh, you did this, or you showed up for the interview and said this, and that wasn't what we wanted to hear. Oh, okay. And that just doesn't necessarily mean I'd change my behavior, but just having that information would be so helpful to know.
Yeah, but it never happens.
No.
Like, I hear this a lot from actors. They try out for a part and they feel good about it, and then they get no callback or anything. And then I'm like, well, do they ever call back and give you feedback? And they said no.
Right.
Because I don't know why, it's just not part of the industry. And I guess just being comfortable with that uncertainty and trying to maybe understand a little bit how you could improve in a similar situation, but really just dwelling on the fact that they rejected you and it was somehow maybe half personal, half professional. Just being comfortable with that and moving on is important.
Right. And knowing, one person's opinion isn't necessarily a fact. So if you get rejected for something, the person didn't think you were the right person for the job, it doesn't mean that you're bad.
What did you just say? A person's opinion is not fact. Steve, you should be writing these things down.
Yeah, I wrote a few things down.
These are great for the article.
Yeah.
Number 4 on your 5 ways to simplify, take charge of your money. This, obviously, I'm very experienced with, and is so critical. Like, people do not understand what money is, I find.
Yes.
Like, if they make $10 today, they think they're going to automatically make $10 tomorrow. And if they lose $10 today, they think they're going to lose $10 tomorrow. Or if they have $100,000, let's say they inherited something, they don't know whether that means they should save $100,000, they should spend $100,000, they should spend 50 and save 50. Like, people just don't know what money is and the basics of money, because we're geared towards just thinking of money as a salary, and we just need to get bigger and bigger salaries, and that's success. But money is much more nuanced than that.
Right. And as a therapist, we know money is the number one stress of most people in America. And I would see it all the time. And there's all these studies about debt and mental health. The more debt you have, the worse your mental health tends to be. And we don't know which comes first. Your mental health problems lead to more debt, or your debt leads to more mental health problems. But we know they play off of each other.
And it's probably hand in hand.
I think it is. And, and I can say certainly when people come into my therapy office and my anxiety would go up, and they'd say, oh, I got, my heating bills coming in this week, and my electricity might be shut off. And what are you going to do about this? And some of them were just so relaxed. They didn't have enough anxiety about it. Where I'm thinking, you really should be worried about this, or my car is broken down and I don't have any way to fix it, and we don't have public transportation. So what are you going to do about it? As compared to, some people just couldn't sleep at night. They just, no matter how much money they had, they just weren't comfortable. But plenty of people just were living paycheck to paycheck and, had no desire to save for an emergency. Tax season would be the time when they, would get these huge refunds, and then they'd already have it spent 4 times before they even got the check. And it was just incredible to see, when people were going through depression, how they dealt with money, but when they got better, sometimes their financial habits got better. But I think there's such a link between mental health and financial health, and I wish that we talked more about that.
So how does, in your view, how does someone take control of their money?
When I see somebody who says, all right, I'm going to get out of debt, and they start paying it off, the transformation sometimes is incredible. And then when people finally feel like, oh, I don't have to be in debt my entire life, I could pay off those student loans, I can pay off these medical bills, and they become confident, it changes everything. Then they don't look at $10 the same anymore. They know, okay, just because I have $10, I don't have to spend $12. I can spend $2 and then save $8 and put it towards my bills. And once they feel like, okay, I could actually pay my bills off, then they get more excited about it and start to pay more attention to where their money goes. But I think most people don't have a budget. And even if you asked them, and the studies are something like 1 in 4 people say, I have a budget. But then if you ask them if they write it down, almost nobody does. Well, you don't have a budget in your head about where your money goes.
This is actually, I realize as you're talking, this one topic could be an entire podcast, because there's so many nuances to everything. So for instance, when you talk about debt, yes, if someone's constantly maxing out their credit cards and living beyond their means, but thinking that their next big win is right around the corner and they'll be able to pay back their debt, that's probably unhealthy. But there's also healthy times to take on debt. Like if interest rates are low, you should refinance your house and things like that. But that's a little more subtle. And then even more subtle is, if you have a lot of credit card debt, but you also need to feed your kids, sometimes you should just not pay back your debt and let the credit card companies come after you, because that's part of the, it's part of the almost American stigma that you need to pay back your credit card debt. But people forget that credit card debt, and any debt really, is a contract, and there's two sides of the contract. One is, if you pay your debt, this happens. The other side is, if you don't pay your debt, this happens. So you're allowed to not pay a debt if you're willing to accept the consequences of it.
Right.
So if you don't pay your credit card debt, your credit score will go down. There's chances of them taking you to court, but it's actually a fairly small chance. And you have to understand the mechanics of what happens to debt when you don't pay it back. So mortgage debt, credit card debt, and student loan debt are three different kinds of debt where different things happen depending if you don't pay it back. And understanding that is part of the nuance. And then there's the whole psychology of, Ben Franklin said, at the end of the year, if you made $100 but spent 101, unhappiness. If you made $100 but spent 99, bliss. So there's kind of the psychology around spending less than you make, which may or may not be true. Like, you and I both have a more entrepreneurial way of making money, which is not necessarily good or bad, but it's more volatile.
Right.
So you make money when a book comes out, and depending on how well the book does, or you make money on your entrepreneurial ventures, which could be good some months, bad other months. For the past 20 years and 32 days, I haven't had a job that's paid my salary. So I get money in chunks. So some years I make zero money, but I still have to spend money every month, rent or payments or bill, whatever it is. And so I get stressed sometimes if I feel like I'm having death by 1,000 cuts, like just money's going out 1,000 times before one chunk of money comes in. So that sometimes is an irrational stress because, sooner or later I'll get the next chunk of money. So, but anyway, there's a 1,000 things about, another thing is how do you use money to make money? I think there's the opposite poles of greed and fear that a person has to deal with. Like, oh my gosh, this investment's a no-brainer. I'm going to put all my money into it, but then you can't sleep at night until the investment comes through.
Right.
So you have to understand the right level of money management. You have to understand, like in poker, it's called, you always have to stay in the game. You can't you can't put so much in a hand that you're going to get kicked out of the game forever. So there's a lot of nuances around that. But again, that could be the 13 things, mentally strong rich people don't do is an entire category by itself.
It really is. I mean, as you know, wealth doesn't get rid of financial anxiety. Plenty of people who have a lot of money still worry so much about money that they struggle to function. And right now, entrepreneurs, of course, are sort of revered as that's where it's at. But not everybody has the mindset to become an entrepreneur, and that's okay. And for people that, if you enjoy your job and you get a salary and that helps you to have peace of mind with money, that's okay. But for a lot of people, I don't necessarily need a day-to-day job and a day-to-day paycheck, as neither do you. But, how do you make peace with money? And sometimes just out simplifying, come up with a plan, have some goals, figure out what are you doing with your money, know where it goes. But for some people, it's so anxiety provoking, they can't even sit down and think about it because brings up too much anxiety to face it.
Yeah, it brings up a lot of anxiety. Like, for instance, if the IRS sends you a letter, you absolutely need to open it like that minute. But so many people kind of hide it in the bookshelf and say, you know what, I'm going to open it when they send me maybe a fourth letter. But by then, they might be seizing your bank account. Right. But it's very stressful, and you have to be able to confront that stress. And the other thing is, who you choose to spend your life with, no matter how much you love them or you're attracted to them or whatever, they kind of need to be on the same level with you in terms of their financial understanding. Like, you don't want to be with someone who spends crazily while you're a little bit more frugal.
Right.
Or maybe you do. Maybe that's a good balance. Like, all these things are nuanced.
Yes, and I think people forget that. They go for chemistry and not necessarily the compatibility. And so when it comes to money, obviously that's what lands tons of people in my therapy office is a saver and a spender got together and they just can't get along and they fight about money all day, every day.
Well, and they split the difference. So the saver gets more
Yes.
polarized towards saving and the spender gets more polarized towards spending.
Exactly. And then the spender ends up, hiding things and savers, got a account squirreled away as well and their secrets. And it's amazing how much money can create this relationship problem that then people just can't solve. And a lot of people get divorced over it.
So given all of these nuances, like what's something you recommend people either start with or read or whatever to kind of get a grip on this?
I think I like Dave Ramsey's approach about paying off debt. I think for people that want to get out of debt, that's a great place to start. And then for people that want to build wealth, Chris Hogan, Dave Ramsey's retirement guru, is a great place to go too, I think. But to just find, to stay away from get-rich-quick schemes, but to find something that you know about, learn about it, and that you actually want to invest in rather than just throwing money at a financial advisor that you don't know anything about.
Yeah, like someone wrote me last night, her husband recently passed away and she got some money. And so now she's being aggressively pitched by a couple of financial managers. And she said, what should I do? She asked me specifically to look into some financial managers that that are really aggressively selling themselves to her. And I suggested, there's no rush. Like whether you put money with them 6 months from now, that's not going to, or now, it's not going to really change your long-term financial picture. Why don't you just do nothing for 6 months? I always tell people, let this additional money marinate your soul a little bit before you make big changes. Your husband passing away and the new money has changed enough. You don't now have to simply send your money completely to someone else's bank account that you don't really know that well just because they say they're going to take care of you. Even people who you know well could lose all your money for you.
Exactly.
So again, there's so many nuances there, but it's important. And I think on the entrepreneurial side, it's okay if someone's not entrepreneurial, but people even with a full-time job could often be entrepreneurial on the job in various ways. And they could also try in their spare time small entrepreneurial activities. And again, that's the topic of another podcast, but that's something to think about.
Oh,
like you've been able to do that.
I love side hustles.
Yes.
I think if everybody started a side hustle, I think the world would be a better place.
Well, and I highly recommend one of our, maybe it was 2 podcasts ago, where you described your side hustle that did well for you. I'll just leave it at that, but I highly recommend that podcast, and people got a lot of benefit from that. So the 5th thing is gain control of your time. And this also is so critical and even recently has changed my life.
Yeah, tell us about your smartphone adventure.
So we talked earlier how I stopped taking my smartphone out during the day. So it doesn't mean I don't use my smartphone when I get home. I make phone calls and so on. But I did this because Yuval Harari, the author of *Sapiens*, told me he doesn't even own a smartphone. And I asked him, well, what if you're out meeting your spouse? How do you coordinate? And he said, it was so simple, his answer. He was like, well, we agree where to meet in advance, and then we just meet there. And, people just don't do that anymore.
Right.
They're like, oh, at 3:00, I'll be around this area and let's just text and figure it out. But I find for me, what's changed is, well, first off, there's the statistics. People touch their smartphone 2,600 times a day. And you can't even imagine that, but that's true. Like, people have studied this. And on average, there's different studies, but if you average the studies, it's about people use their smartphone about 4.5 hours a day. 4.5 hours a day. And I would keep track of when I'm in a cab, instead of reading a book, I'll check Instagram, I'll check Facebook, I'll check Twitter, I'll respond to emails. So it feels like a productivity tool, but it's really not. Like, I'm just scrolling down Instagram, liking photos, that's not productive. And even responding to emails in a cab is not very productive, because what I do now is, a cab's a great example, or if I'm out at a cafe is a great example, I'll bring a book and I'll read, or I'll bring my notepad and I'll write down ideas instead of being on my cell phone. So what I would used to do is I would think I'm reading, but every few pages I would check my cell phone
Right.
for, oh, did I get a new email? Did I get a new Facebook request? Whatever. Now when I go home, it's instead of it being spread out over hours checking my emails, I'll spend just 5 minutes. Okay, what are the 3 emails I got in the past 2 hours that are important? I'll quickly respond to them, and that's it. That's the entire time I spend on the computer, and then I'll go back to reading. So I've saved so much time and actually become so much more productive. This has just been a month-long experiment. I thought it would be a 1-week experiment, but it was good enough. I kept doing it, and it's been great. It's been a good way to get more control of my time.
I love that. I think probably more of us, that inspires me to say, how do I spend less time on my smartphone? Of course, for me, I get an email from my agent or something about a book, something like that. And it's the rush that I get from getting that email. So then I just want to check it, or what if I got one and I was, as if it matters. If I answer 4 hours later or in 4 minutes, it doesn't really matter.
Right,
But it's,
for most things.
Right. The vast majority of emails I get are just not that particularly urgent. But
Here's the extreme that people tell me. What if your child was
Right.
hit by a car and is in the ER and you missed that email? And this sounds harsh, but my child already has been hit by the car. It's not like
Yep.
it's not like me looking at an email will avoid her getting hit by
Right.
the car. I'll still go to the ER that day, maybe an hour or two after I would have, but that's really the worst case scenario, and it doesn't really change her life or mine.
And we forget that 20 years ago, we lived like that.
Right.
Our parents walked around knowing that if we got struck by a car, somebody would get them the message at some point. But now it's such a panic, right? Of, oh no, I forgot my phone, I have to go get it because something terrible might happen. But how much it's impacting our lives on a day-to-day basis versus, the one worst case scenario. And as you say, you can't prevent it anyway. You just get the news a little bit later.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about gaining control of your time, speaking of news, is I never read the news. I haven't picked up a newspaper since 2010. So, and that has, I used to read maybe 3 or 4 newspapers a day. I would read every magazine, whether they were monthlies or weeklies or whatever. I would read every magazine that came out. And so just avoiding all of that and instead reading good books, people say, well, I've saved so much time and I've been able to read so much more and do so much more with my life because reading the news would probably take an hour or 2 a day out of my life. And nothing in the news ever really changes my life.
Right. And I think so many people, though, feel compelled that they have to read the news, like they're going to be uninformed, right? If they aren't reading the news all the time. But then, they end up in arguments with people on Facebook about politics and...
Right. Like, so two people in their suburban air-conditioned homes arguing on Facebook with each other until one says, that's it, unfriend. And
Right.
That's not going to have any impact. It's not going to change the world. No one changes their mind. So it's not going to make anyone more informed. It just makes you angry. It's useless. And if you think about so we're recording this podcast a couple days after Brett Kavanaugh just got, sworn into the Supreme Court. So it's not as if so I haven't read a single newspaper article about the whole thing, but it's not as if I'm uninformed. Like the general zeitgeist of things people talk about, you still hear.
Right.
And I know all the issues about it. But regardless of where I stood on the issues, certainly would have had zero impact on whether he got sworn into the Supreme Court or not. I have no influence there. And so many people I know are angry on one side or the other. And again, I'm not being political here. It's just everybody was angry. And my view was, I have no impact. And probably what's going to happen is pretty much predetermined. And the best way I can have impact is to keep doing what I normally do and what I'm good at, which is either writing or podcasting or whatever. And, I don't know what else to say about it. There's no benefit to me being informed by reporters who know less than the authors and the good researched books I'm reading.
Right. When you think about how much information, even when you read articles or you watch the news, how much more informed are you truly, right? We don't actually know what's going on. We're just getting that information. But for a lot of the people I worked with in my therapy office too over the years, it's been about, well, maybe if the news is really upsetting to you, maybe you should watch less news or turn it off. Or if you don't know where your time is going, let's do a time study. Let's take a log this week, and I want you to write down where your time goes. And they're really surprised to know, gosh, I thought I was on Facebook for 10 minutes a day. Turns out I'm on there for 2 hours. Or I do some online shopping, but only occasionally. Oh, I actually am online shopping for 3 hours a day. So I think it's just so important to be aware of where your time goes. And if it's not healthy, it's not helpful, it's not improving your well-being, then say, I'm not going to do it. And that's tough because I think it goes against the grain to say I'm going to shut off the news, or I'm not going to carry my smartphone.
People really do accuse me of being uninformed, and they get angry about it. But I don't know, first off, if I wanted to be informed, what would I look at? Like because of the business model of news changing so rapidly in the past 20 years, every news outlet is biased now.
Right.
So whether, too much to the right or too much to the left, like there's not really a central news source. And so I don't even know where I would go for the news. Like where do you go for your news?
Well, I write for Inc. or I write for Forbes, so I get a lot of news just by going to put my articles in there. But as you know too, like a lot of these people who are writing articles are just sitting at home in their pajamas and they just watched whatever news program and now they're writing an article based on that.
Right.
It's not as if it's somebody who's right there in the know who can give you more information than anybody else.
Right. So if I have a choice of like reading the latest 500 articles about, Brett Kavanaugh, or reading the book 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do, which is based on, major life experiences you've had, and then your experiences as a therapist, and then years and years and years of research, and then you putting together, draft after draft of your best thoughts on the topic, as opposed to reading something somebody who barely knows anything wrote last night in 15 minutes. I'd rather read your book. That will make me a better person, as opposed to every day on the Brett Kavanaugh stuff, I'd hear people talking, oh, well, this happened, then this happened, now this is definitely going to happen. Nobody was ever right about anything. All of their predictions were wrong. And now all of the facts have all just sort of disappeared because the news cycle's on to the next thing. And I'm sure it's still part of the societal consciousness, but again, I'd still rather be mentally stronger. So that's how I can have more impact, is by improving myself. And I don't think being uninformed about about 90% of issues is such a bad thing.
Right. And I think it's one of those, goes back to, you can't control the news, can't control what happens. You can control how you respond to it. And a lot of that's how much you take in. I mean, how many hours do people spend just mindlessly scrolling through social media and clicking on random news articles? And then at the end of the day, you don't even remember most of what you read anyway.
Right. So I like I said, I don't read newspapers, but now also, I've never, since 2010, I haven't gone to news websites, but I did make an exception last Sunday. And I'll tell you why. I was doing stand-up comedy here where we're doing this podcast, and I figured, okay, I wanted a new first joke. And I said, maybe there's some topical thing that could lead to a joke. So I went to CNN.com, and after the Brett Kavanaugh headlines, the only headline that stuck out was Kanye West deletes his Twitter account. And so I'm trying to think, why is this even like a headline? Like what possibly could it be? And it did lead to a joke, so I made sure it helped me. But I just saw right away, this is the first time in 8 years looking at, CNN.com or any news site, and you could see why it's so worthless to do. So
right, there's both ends of the spectrum of, you need to be so informed, and here's all this political stuff that we're going to regurgitate, and then stuff about celebrities, people that you don't know, random stuff too. And I think, we just have become a society that consumes so much information, and we don't do anything with it. It's not enhancing our lives. So you have to control what's coming in so that you can live your best life.
But I think you said something before, which is really valuable, which is, I think measurement is everything. So if you take a diary of how you spend your time, that's incredibly useful, because it'll show things that you don't realize. It's very similar to, I ran into a friend of mine the other day. I hadn't seen him in a year or two, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you've lost a lot of weight. And he said, thank you for noticing. I've lost 25 pounds in the past year. I said, how did you do it? And he basically writes down every food that he eats during the day, and then he has an app that tells him the calories. And so now he can specifically see how many calories he eats, and it was very different from what he thought he was eating. So whether it's calories or how you spend your money or how you spend your time or maybe how much time you spend with people you love versus people you don't love, or how much time do you watch TV, measuring is everything. Like, I think that's so important.
It is, because our brains, we distort things. So if you ask somebody how many calories do you think you ate today, they might say, 1,500. But then if they really added it up, it might be twice that. Or sometimes when people say, yeah, I go to the gym a lot, we'll take out a calendar and I'll have them just hang this calendar on your fridge and just put a check mark on the days you actually go to the gym. And that motivates them to go more because they think, oh, that's embarrassing. There's only one check mark in the last 2 weeks. So then they start going more. I think sometimes just having a visual of how you look at how you spend your time or what habits you engage in makes a big difference.
Right. And Jerry Seinfeld talks about this. He would write a check every time every day that he wrote, like if he wrote a joke. And the checks started to get so many in a row, he didn't want to break the chain.
Right.
And so he never stopped writing a check down because he would make sure he would always write so he could write that check because he was afraid to break the chain and start over. So like the act of doing that in itself, it reinforces the habit.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's you said also the brains tend to distort things, and that's an interesting comment because it's not that I don't think it's that brains necessarily distort in a bad way. It's just that for a million years we didn't really evolve to we didn't have social media for millions of years.
Right.
So our brains didn't even know how to keep track of this, or we didn't really have to worry about too much calorie intake. We needed to have enough calorie intake for millions of years. And so our brains, again, we don't have the DNA to process that information. So people should realize it's not that they're not smart enough to keep track of these things. It's just that our brains were never made. It's not the right tool to keep track of these things.
Right. And that's a good point because I think, try as we might to keep track of certain things, it just doesn't work. Your 3 minutes of checking email here, there, and everywhere. At the end of the day, it's just a blur. You don't know whether you spent 30 minutes or 3 hours checking your emails, and it adds up. And so for people that I've done this with, and they start to add it up a little bit. And at the end of the day, when you really count the hours of how much time you put towards something that you didn't even realize was sucking your time, then it's really eye-opening. And they say, okay, well, now how do you get proactive about how you spend your time so that you don't keep doing those things? So
this was 5 ways to simplify your life so you can make room for things that matter most. And I think, do you have time to keep going?
Sure.
So, because I want to do 10 mental strength exercises that will make you stronger. This could be like a part 2.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.